Good day guys, welcome to today's video. In today's video we are going to talk about function. So in this video I'm going to explain about function declaration, function definition, function call, function parameters, and function argument. Okay, so what is a function? A function is a block of code that is meant to perform a task. Okay, so let's look at this serial.begin. This serial.begin is a function. Okay, whenever we put like a digital write is also a function. And which action does digital write function perform? It helps to set the pin high or low. That is the work of that digital write function. So in this video I'm going to show you how you can create your own function. So creating your own function is also known as function declaration in programming terms. So whenever you want to create a function in a programming terms, it is called function declaration because we are declaring the function. So let me show you how to declare a function, or in other words, how to create your own function. Okay, so let me show you how to declare a function of your own. So if you go down here, this is a function, and there is a rules when declaring a function you must abide in. First of all, the function that you are about to declare, you must specify the return type, okay, and the name of the function, and if that function has parameter or passing any argument, which I'm going to explain in this video. So what do I mean by a return type of a function? You can see this is my own function that I created, which is count, and the return type of this function is void. The word void means that I don't want to return anything, okay? But if you want to return a value, you use an integer. Which integer? That integer return type will return a value, which I'm also going to show you the difference between void function and integer function. Okay, so but first of all, we are discussing about the void function because we are using a non-return type function, which is void. We are not returning anything. We just want to create a function that will perform a task for us. And if you look at this digital write function, if you go in, if you go to the behind the scene of that function, you will see some certain steps, some certain codes which they wrote in order to make up that digital write function. Okay, so whenever you program a group of code that will make up a function, it is known as function definition. So function declaration is that we are declaring this function here, which is void, void count. Okay, this is the function that we are declaring here. This is void count. That means we have declared the function. Then the definition of the function is this code that we just write inside this function. And remember that any function must start with a curly brace, opening and closing curly brace. So this is the opening of this function curly brace, while this one is the closing curly braces. Okay, because this shows is a group of code that will perform an action. So using functions in our code makes it more simpler for us. So let me go ahead and explain this function that I just created here. So what are these functions that I created? I want whenever I call this function count, it should perform a counting number from, it should count from 0 to 10. This is just an example of the function I myself, the programmer, want to create. Unlike the digital write, digital read function that takes a pin number and the state of a pin. If you go behind the scene of that digital write function, you will see some steps of code which makes up that digital write function. Okay, and that steps of code is called function definition. So this thing that I'm doing here, I'm defining the function. I'm just defining the performance, performance this my count function will carry. So that is why it is called function definition. I'm defining the steps, what the function, this function that I'm creating now, what is going to perform. Okay, I hope you understand the difference between function declaration and function definition. whenever you create a function, it's a function declaration, and whenever you write the codes which that function you are creating will perform, is called function definition. So let me explain what I'm doing here. So in here I just declare a variable which is integer d, and inside this function that I created I put a for loop. Remember I said I want this function to count from 0 to 10. Okay, so I use a for loop function inside that function too. Okay, and I'll do d equals to, I now set my variable which is d equals to 0, and I say if d is less than 11, if d is less than 11, this is the condition that I'm giving to this for loop, it should print d, and whenever it prints d, let it delay for 100 milliseconds. Then it should update it by doing d++ by adding 1 to the 0. Okay, and I also taught you how for loop function works. So this is just there's no difference in what I'm doing here. I'm just using for loop to do a count of 0 to 10. That is what I'm doing here. So this is a function that I created, and mind you that this function is created out of the void loop. This is the void loop. You can see void loop here. This is void loop, this is the opening curly braces, and this is the closing curly braces. This is void loop. Okay, but this function that I'm creating it outside the main for loop function and setup function. Okay, so I'm creating it outside, it's not inside the for loop. Okay, so after declaring the function, then the next step is to define the function, which I just explained here. I explained that the function is going to count from 0 to 10. Then let's go to what is called function call. So what is this function call? Function call is when you call this function that you created inside a particular code. Okay, so whenever I use digital write, what did I do? I just call the function digital write. That is what is called function call. So whenever you call a digital write or digital or whatever function that comes with Arduino that you are calling inside your program, is known as function call, because you are calling the function to come and perform a task. So this function call is when you call your function, whether the function that comes with the Arduino or the function that you created. That is what we call function call. So I have explained function declaration, function definition, and now I'm talking about function call. So this function that we just created here, which is void count, I want to call this function inside the void loop, because if I did not call remember this void loop is just like the main area where our whole code is being focused on. This is the void loop that our compiler will go into and look what code we have written into that void loop and execute it. Okay, so now that I have created this my function out of the void loop, I have to call that function inside that void loop so that the compiler will be able to carry out that function which I have created or which I have declared. Okay, so whenever you call your function, it is called function call. And remember, see the way I called my function, which is count, and I put this bracket and semicolon. Okay, I did not put the void. Whenever you are putting the void is when you are declaring it or whenever you are creating the function. Remember, the word create or declare is the same thing. So whenever you are creating the function is where you will define the return type of your function, which is void in this case. Okay, but whenever you are calling the function, you don't need to put the void. You just call the function by its name. So as I call this function inside this void loop, whenever the compiler comes in, the compiler will try to locate where this function comes from, and whenever you see this name count, the compiler will come into this void count that I just created out of the loop and see what I just defined. There. Okay, that is how the compiler execute the code. So now that I've finally declared the function, defined the function, I now call the function. So this is now the function. I call the function inside the void loop. So whenever the compiler is compiling, it will see this count now and execute it. And the reason why it will execute it is because we have defined the body of the function, which is here, which is this void loop. Okay, so let's go to our simulator and see how this function that we created works. So remember, this function will count from 0 to 10, and I've called this function inside the void loop. So make sure whenever you call your function, use a semicolon, just like other functions that you are using, digital write, digital read, and all those things. Remember, after calling that function, use a semicolon. So that is what you are going to do whenever you create your own function. Make sure you use a semicolon to end it. Okay, so let's go to our simulator and see how this function that we just created will perform. So we are in our Pro Tools simulator. So after compiling the code, just make sure you burn the code inside the microcontroller, Arduino microcontroller. So I've done that. So I'm going to simulate it and see the function that we created, if it is going to work like we just explained. Okay, so let me just simulate the function. Let's see. So I'm using a serial port. You can see the serial port, what is printing. It's printing from 0 to 1. You can see this is 0, this is 1. Okay, you can see it's printing from 0 to 10. So let's watch and see if the function we created is going to print from that 0 to 10. Okay, so we are in 9 position. This is 9, this is 10. It will start over again because we are in void loop. We call the function inside the void loop, and you know that void loop we keep on repeating. So once we reach to 10, it will start over again, because the function that we created is meant to count from 0 to 10. Okay, so you can see how we created our own function. Okay, so that is it all about this video. In our next video, I will talk about how to pass function parameters and function argument, how to pass an argument to a function. So see you in our next video, where we will be talking about function parameters and functions arguments. Thank you for watching. Bye.